Good afternoon, Kerry.
Hey, John Harper. Thank you. We were just both sitting here commenting on your cap. It says Bronze Star. Well, first of all, thank you for your service, but did we know that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the last part.
No, I said we're commenting on your cap.
Yeah,
It says Bronze
right,
Star.
Right.
Look at you.
Yeah, I usually don't wear this. Normally, I just keep it on my dashboard. But,
Yeah, you're not really like a look at me person. Of course, in radio, it's hard to be a look at me person. But I'm just saying, I think that's the first time I've seen that cap. But again, thank you for your service.
Thank you. I decided to wear it because my hair is a mess. And
Well, both you and Jim, served our country, and we talk about it all the time. Bill Johnson, a board-certified elder law attorney, Bill Johnson. We have a great radio show, Good Information Ahead, but we were commenting on the fact that we lost Joe Steckler, our founder, back at the end of January, and he, of course, is a retired Navy captain, and then. We just got the sad news last week that Terry Steckler, his wife, also went on to join him. And I was telling Bill, I said they were telling me that because of his service, they're going to basically have him laid to rest at Arlington. But apparently, they're going to be able to have Terry there as well.
Really?
And so I was asking Bill. I said I didn't know that was possible. But
I didn't either.
Yeah. So we were saying that seems like it's going to go that way. The thing I do know is that on Saturday, June the 7th at 10:30 is when now they're going to have the memorial. We talked about this a little bit before. There at Holy Name of Jesus, the Catholic Church right there beachside, which is where they devoted so much of their time and attention. Just wonderful people. I was saying to Bill, you just don't run into many people like Joe and Terry. They were just a fantastic couple.
They were great. And Jim Veltro, did you know that about Arlington?
Oh, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
There's some hoops you have to jump through, but yes, you can do that. It's one of those things that people don't think of a lot of times.
Yeah.
And, it's really, really good that Saint Terry.
Yeah, of course.
We call her Saint because she was a saint to put up with Joe for all those years.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I'm sure that that will work out. But there are some hoops you have to jump through, and I'm sure that's already in progress.
Yeah, that's what their son Steve Steckler was putting all that together. That's exactly what they were talking about, and he promised he was going to give us updates so as we get closer, we can keep everybody who knew and loved Joe and Terry kind of up to speed. And it was funny because he wrote after Joe passed, he said, "Can you send me some articles and things about Joe?" I said, "Oh, I can send you a treasure trove," because Joe was so prolific with all of his articles and everything. So we got a whole bunch of materials, and he asked the same question about Terry. And I started digging through. I said, I don't think I have an article about Terry. She was always willing to be the behind-the-scenes kind of the engine room that kept Joe going is the best way I know how to say it,
Well, we do call her Saint Terry. I mean, she was beatified back there. But now she did so much. She really did so much. She was the unsung hero. She was the person behind the scenes that was kind of making sure that everything kind of came together. Joe was a prolific writer, prolific do-gooder, and Terry was the one that was sitting there saying, okay, let's organize this stuff a little bit. And Terry made it happen. She really did. She was very much responsible for a lot of the good things that Helping Seniors of Brevard started to be and became.
I really think that, and I personally believe that they're up in heaven looking down. I was going, you guys keep this going, keep this rolling, keep this rolling. And I was thinking maybe Joe got up there and he's trying to organize something, needed Terry's help. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. Hey, get back up here. I can't do this stuff by myself.
But sometimes and Bill was saying that in his practice, because remember, as a board certified elder law attorney, you're dealing with all of these issues all of the time. In fact, it's one of the things we talk about. That's why you go to somebody like Bill Johnson, because this isn't his first rodeo. He's been doing this for all these years. I mean, he's been for a while, he headed up the entire Florida bar elder law section. Am I saying that right, Bill? Okay, so I'm saying, like, you go to somebody, but he said it's not that uncommon that people will who are that close in life will pass that close together. Mm-hmm. So there you have it. But we'll keep you posted on that. We love them both, and that's why maybe we should call it Joe and Terry Senior Resource Center in Brevard. The office.
Maybe that's not a bad idea. Maybe we'll bring that up at the next board meeting. Jim Veltro, Terry always had a cute expression that when we would leave the show, she would say to you or I. Do you remember what that was?
I'm not sure, John. What was it?
About if we get in trouble, call her too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If we do get in trouble, call her. Yeah, right. And she'd be sitting next to us at the bench in the jail saying, dang, that was fun.
Yeah, what wonderful people.
Yeah.
Well, we do actually have a show today, and I want us to get into that because it is so kind. We were actually having a little staff meeting. Nancy Deerdorf, who is our Director of Development, and Karen Wernland, who is our center director. We try to get together once a week and kind of go through the things that we need to be trying to stay on top of. And we were talking about literally you, Bill Johnson, how kind you have been to this organization to have helped Joe, just like John Harper did. You guys helped Joe before there was a Helping Seniors. You helped him with the Brevard Alzheimer's, and then you have been helping us in Helping Seniors ever since the day Joe came up with the idea to do this. And they said that for you to be able to take an hour a month out of your busy schedule and come down and help educate us on things we need to know is really a blessing. So thank you, Bill.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And I loved it because I get to send a note to Bill and say, okay, what do you think would be a good topic for us to talk about on radio? And so he popped right back. He said, we haven't talked about Homestead in quite a while, Homestead in Florida. And I started having a little imagination of the little girls running down the hillside home. What was it? What was the TV show? Little House on the Prairie. But when we're talking about homestead, this is actually like a legal term, right? This has to do with when you have a property and it becomes designated on the tax records as this is your primary residence where you live. Am I saying that right? Is that where we begin with the definition of homestead?
Yeah, it's your primary residence.
So even if you're a snowbird, like for many years we were snowbirds. We were working in our corporate days up in New York City and Manhattan, but then we had our home here in Florida, and we always tried to observe the rule that we were down here 6 months of the year, whatever it was, plus a couple of days, so that we would be able to become Florida residents. Didn't realize for any other reason that we just wanted to be in Florida as much as we could, particularly during the wintertime. But I didn't really realize that there were legal ramifications that really accrue to you. And I didn't realize at the time there was differences from state to state to state, how all that is worked with. So I guess maybe, Bill, maybe a place to begin with, what should we understand about what homestead means? Because I guess you can only have one homestead at a time, right? If you're a snowbird, you pick like, okay, I'm in Michigan in the summers and I'm in Florida during the winters, but you pick one as your permanent home. Am I saying that right?
Correct. It would be your primary residence. And they do check.
Yeah.
The states do share the information because you can only have one homestead.
Right.
So they do verify that and make sure you're not claiming homestead somewhere in another state.
Now, I know you and I have talked about this on the radio many times because a lot of people, maybe they retired to Florida, but they had property up north, and maybe they have rental houses or something up north, but that's also different than homestead, right?
Correct. Homestead is in Florida, it's your primary residence. It's defined as a half acre in a municipality or 60 acres outside of a municipality.
Okay, so what happens if you live on a postage stamp lot like they do now? Like a lot of the newer houses, the trend is, most people don't want to get out and do yard work, so they like having more house, less yard. How does that work? Does that impact all that?
Well, as long as it's less than half an acre, that is homesteaded.
Okay. So then when you have homestead, I know that normally, like when we get our tax bill every year, we get some sort of a discount because it is in fact our homestead. Is that
correct? So when first part of the show, I guess we'll talk about the taxation of homesteads, and then the second part we'll talk about transferring homesteads and the homestead protections for creditors' claims.
Okay.
So what they look at is it's your primary residence. They look at who was the owner as of January 1st of any particular year. And if you just bought the property, you can go down and apply for homestead, and it will be for the following year.
Okay.
But if you buy it at the very beginning of the year, you have to do it before March 1st.
Okay.
So if you bought a house at the very beginning of the year and you got in and claimed homestead before March 1st, it would be applicable to that tax year.
Okay.
But after March 1st, it's all to the next tax year.
Okay.
And that's important for several reasons. One is you get $25,000 off your property taxes, which is it's equivalent to about $600 in taxes.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. You get $25,000 off the assessed value of your house.
Okay.
And that's equivalent to about $600 or so in property taxes. But more importantly, several years ago, they started putting a cap on homestead property. And the cap means that your house, the taxation of your house cannot increase by the lesser of 3% or the consumer price index.
Ah.
So whatever one's less, that's what applies. So let's say the value of your house goes up 10%. Your property taxes maximum can only go up 3%.
Wow.
So over 10, 20 years, that can be a huge savings because they won't, the houses keep going up, 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 up. Your property tax bill will not follow that. Now, you can really screw that up by transferring your homestead.
Ah.
And there are a whole bunch of different ways people mess this up. Sometimes they add a kid's name to the title.
Whoops.
Yep, whoops. Property gets reassessed current market value. So sometimes you can have their property taxes double or triple because of making a mistake like that. Or sometimes people want to put their homestead in an LLC. I'm not quite sure why, but they do that. That's a transfer. So there are a lot of things that trigger transfers. When you die and leave it to your kids, now the kids are the owners, it gets reassessed.
Right.
So there are things that cause reassessments, and you need to be keenly aware before you do any sort of deed what the tax implication will be for that piece of property. Now, on non-homestead property, the cap is 10%.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to tell you because we've had our home here in Florida since I think it was like 97 or 98. And then I was thinking that we also have property that we got when our moms had moved down to Florida. And those, of course, were not homestead because they were during their lifetimes, but now they're like rental properties. And so I see the difference in the tax bill. It is a huge difference.
Correct. And so if you have a homestead and you rent it out, it's not your primary residence anymore. It gets reassessed.
Yeah.
Because you lost your homestead.
Yeah.
There are some exemptions in addition to just the $25,000.
Oh.
If you're over 65, the $25,000 jumps to $50,000.
Oh, it doubles.
Off your tax bill. Yep. Also, if you are a permanently and totally disabled veteran, you pay no tax.
Oh.
And then there are a variety of exemptions for disabled veterans confined to wheelchairs, totally and permanently disabled persons. There are some exceptions for totally and permanently disabled first responders. And some of these exceptions carry over to the spouse.
Oh.
So if the permanently disabled veteran passes, the spouse still maintains the benefit of that.
Wow.
Unless they do a transfer.
Right.
And that could cause a problem. So there are exceptions that allow you to get even more off the value of the property. And so if you fall into any of those categories, there is a widow's exemption that gets you another $500 off.
Oh, wow.
So widower or widowers. So if you are a widow or widower, you need to go down to the property appraiser and apply for that. And that's where you apply for all these exemptions.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is none of these things, I'm saying this like a statement, but none of these things are automatic. You need to go and actually request and do whatever form that they need about this, right?
And supply them the proof.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, like when you mentioned the, when you turn 65, I think you had mentioned that they take $25,000 off the assessed value before you're 65, and you said that probably on average means it's saving somebody about $600. So, by inference, then, if you're 65 and you go down and are able to get that 65 plus exemption or whatever it's called, you actually could be saving $1,200 off your taxes instead of $600, like in an average case. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Wow.
You are. So, if you fall into one of those categories, it's always worthwhile to go down and find out if you qualify for one of those exemptions. And like I said, I rattled off, about 8 of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And they all have their different, what you have to do to be eligible and that kind of thing. There is also a way to defer your taxes.
Really?
And basically, you can get a homestead tax deferral, and that is on for the assessments which exceed 5% of the applicant's household income for the prior calendar year if the applicant is younger than 65 years old. So if the assessment exceeds 5% of your income, the household income, then you're eligible to have that deferred. If you're over 65, if that assessment exceeds 3% of your income, you are eligible to do that.
Now, what does deferred mean? Deferred means that I must have to pay it at some point, right? I just don't have to pay it right now. Is that?
Well, if you apply for a tax deferral, they basically kick the can down the road.
Right.
And usually what they do is when the property sells, all that comes due.
But see,
it's like a lien.
But that would be so valuable because, as you know, Bill, one of the very primary functions of helping seniors is operating our county senior information helpline. That free call at 321-473-7770. And Karen Wernland and her team of volunteers, they're managing like 4,000 plus calls every year. A lot of them are people who are elderly, who are just having trouble making ends meet. And they need to know about this program because for many of them, just being able to keep a roof over their heads is so important. And I guess that could help a number of seniors if they're aware that program exists.
Correct. And you can also defer in its entirety your homestead tax if your income in the previous calendar year is less than $10,000.
Wow.
Or if it's less than the designated amount in statute 196.075, I think that's the $50,000, and the applicant is 65 years old or older.
Well, this is good to know. I have a question because we've done a lot of radio and TV shows with a lady named Barbara McIntyre, who's kind of like one of our local experts on things reverse mortgage. And she would always explain to Joe and to I, whenever she would come and do a radio show, she would talk to us about, like, basically it's like what she called a HELOC, a line of credit against your home. She said, but you don't have to pay it back unless you want to. And they would take it out of the equity at the back end. But she said there's 2 requirements that you have to do. You have to keep your insurance current on the property, and you have to keep property taxes current. And so she explained that you have to go through like housing counseling and things like that because they really want you to understand what you're getting into when you do it so they understand how all that works. But I was just thinking, like, you could potentially, if your income wouldn't allow you, you could probably look at some combination of you could maybe use that deferral because your idea is I got to use the equity in my house to survive, whatever that actually means, because I don't have enough income to do it. Potentially, you could look at all of that together, it seems like.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, these are the things you learn when you sit down with somebody who studies this all for a living. Wow. First of all, I don't see how you keep it all straight in your head because there's so many nuances of that. But we were talking before the show that Dana Bickley, am I saying that right? She's our property appraiser, and she has been generous with her time. She comes out and speaks at things like the Guardianship Association meetings and different things like that, trying to help us understand that there's programs like this. And I remember saying to you, Bill, just before the show, I remember at one of the most recent places, I believe it was actually, she spoke at the AARP chapter in Indian River, and I remember Karen Warnland coming back and saying, I learned things I didn't know. That's going to help me when I'm on the phone line with, people who are calling us saying, okay, what do I do about this?
So the other thing you need to know, like if you transfer your house into your trust, that does not trigger a reassessment.
But you probably do have to go back and make sure all your paperwork is right about
You do have to go back to the property appraiser's office and still prove you live there.
Wow.
And then if you do a ladybird deed, one of those pay-on-death deeds, that is not a transfer and doesn't cause a reassessment either.
Yeah, but the problem is if you just say, I'm going to put my son on the title because he's going to get the house anyway, now we did something. This is what we talk about all the time, Bill. People do things that they think make sense, but they have no idea what a Pandora's box they actually opened.
Until like 6 months later, they get the property tax bill and found out their property taxes have tripled.
Wow, incredible. We're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, law office, William A. Johnson. We were just at the Boomer Expo where you gave a great talk, but also in the center of the Boomer Guide, and we have a bunch of copies. If you don't have one, you can pick it up at many places, but we have them there at Joe's Senior Resource Center, 1344 South Apollo, and you can pick up a copy there. But what I'm pointing to is you have a guide. It's actually a publication within a publication that has all these things that you want to know about growing older. So it's also on your website, right? FloridaElderlaw.net, right?
Correct.
And then you also do a lot of different talks. If people want to learn about the talks, I know you say go to One Senior Place, but maybe they want to give you guys a call directly. How do they do that?
They can contact us at 321-253-1667.
All right. Board-certified elder law attorney. We're going to come back on the second half of this with even more that you need to know about how Homestead can affect your bills going forward as things move along. So we'll see you for the second half of Helping Seniors in just a moment. It's always good to have Glenn Miller on the radio.
It is. It is. Good stuff. We enjoy it all the time. Our audience, I know, really seems to enjoy it, and so do our guest. Bill Johnson always does.
Yeah.
So let's get back to more of your interesting conversation. Host Kerry Fink, and Kerry is the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. Kerry?
Thank you, John Harper. Yeah, it's always great to be on the radio Wednesdays lunchtime right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. And also for those listening online at WEJF.net, but also for those who catch this as a podcast later, every place that you get podcasts, you'll find Helping Seniors Radio. And one of the reasons we do that is because the conversation we had, for example, in this first half hour with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, where the topic today is Homestead in Florida. And we spent the first half of the show talking a lot about some of the ways that you can reduce your property taxes through legally using the exemptions that are available to you. And so maybe if you missed the first part of the show and you want to go back and catch the wisdom of that, because there are some pretty significant savings that we were talking about, and even ways that you could potentially have deferral of your property taxes if you are income qualified and things like that. So if you want to kind of recapture that, that's one of the reasons why we always put everything we do in our Helping Seniors library. And you can find that library online, helpingseniors.brevard.org. You can find it on our YouTube channel, Helping Seniors of Brevard. You can find it on our Facebook page, Helping Seniors of Brevard, and every place, like I mentioned, that you get a podcast. And a lot of times what we've discovered is people will hear something and they want somebody else, either they know, maybe it's their spouse, their significant other, whatever, they want them to know about this information as well. And the best thing you can always do is shoot them a link and say, hey, this is what Kerry and Bill were talking about on the radio. See if this helps you. So the second half of this show, welcome back, Bill.
Thank you, Kerry.
is we were actually going to shift around and talk about the value of a homestead exemption in Florida. And during the break, I was picking Bill's brain, which I love to do because he knows so much about all this stuff. I was asking him, I said, you deal with people and have been doing this for so many years, and so many people maybe are like dual residents, meaning they're up north for some part of the year because it's where their career was, and now they're in Florida because of the sunshine and all that. And so I said, do you ever run across situations where it makes sense for the person to retain, if all things being equal and it's really their choice, does it make sense to stay the homestead resident up north? And he said, very infrequently. Am I saying that basically right? Because we have a lot of benefits here in Florida.
Yeah, we have a lot of benefits, including no income tax. So that's a big one.
Yeah.
We have no estate tax either.
That's a big deal, right? Because if you're up north, or if you're in a state that's a function, and you have this grandiose plan, I'm going to leave stuff behind to other members of my family, you're still going to have to start paying out because of that, right?
Yeah, you could end up paying the state, their estate tax.
But if in Florida, that doesn't exist.
Correct.
Wow.
So there are a lot of benefits, and we're going to talk about the next one.
Let's go.
Okay, so we talked about property, the homestead property tax exemption.
Uh-huh.
The second big, and there are 3 big homesteads in Florida. The second one is our state constitution protects your house from creditors' claims.
Ooh.
And remember, again, that's a half acre in a municipality and up to 60 acres outside of a municipality. And there are only 5 things, generally speaking, in Florida that they can come and take your house for. Mm-hmm. And Kerry, do you know what those are?
Well, I remember one was income tax.
Of course, you don't pay the federal government income taxes, they can come and take your house.
Okay, I'm thinking. You don't pay your property tax.
Don't pay your property taxes, they can come and get your house.
Okay. 3 would be, is it the equivalent of like if I gave somebody a lien on my property specifically? Is that like your mortgage or something?
A mortgage, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, if you default on your mortgage, they can foreclose.
So that's
and
3
take
out
your
of 5.
house.
Now it's going to get real hairy because I can't remember.
4 would be somebody worked on your house, you didn't pay them, and they went through a process and perfected what we call a mechanic's lien. Yeah. They can foreclose on your house. And then the last one is fairly common in Florida, is if you don't pay your homeowner association or condo association dues.
Wow, yeah.
They can come after your house. That's it.
Wow.
So if you owe $500,000 in credit card debt, they can't touch your house.
Medical bills.
Medical bills can't touch your house. Like nursing home bills or Medicaid liens can't touch your house. And you can leave that, as long as you leave your house to a family member, free and clear of that as well.
But this is not necessarily the assumption that you can make in another state, right?
This is true in only about 7 states.
Wow.
43 states, Medicaid could put a lien on your house and for any services, and creditors can come after your house. But in Florida, they cannot.
It's a significant benefit to being a Floridian.
It is. It is a very big benefit. Surprisingly, we're a very debtor-friendly state.
Yeah.
There are a few other assets out there that creditors can't touch, namely your IRAs, 401ks, things like that, retirement funds, and also any kind of life insurance product, whether it be life insurance or annuities.
Oh, wow.
So if you go back to, remember O.J. Simpson moved to Miami?
Yep.
That's because his house was homesteaded, exempt from creditors' claims, and all his assets were in annuities.
So even if somebody said, well, I have a judgment against you.
Well, the Goldmans did. They had a huge judgment against him, but they couldn't collect. Correct.
Wow. So Florida really makes sense to this. But again, we're talking about protections that really renound to your homestead property. But if, like, let's say you spend half of your year, I'm just going to say you're in Wisconsin or something, and then you spend the other half in Florida, and there really wouldn't be a reason for you to say, well, I need to, again, as long as I can control my schedule and meet whatever the rule is. I don't know what it is exactly. I just remember it was something like 6 months plus a certain number of days, and then they say, okay, you're really a Floridian. But if you could do that and do that legitimately, that really gives you a lot of protection that you wouldn't get like in another state, maybe.
Correct.
So how do you set up to become let's say you are a snowbird. How do you set this up?
Well, generally, to determine whether or not you're residents, we look at a lot of things. One is, have you declared your house as your primary residence, homestead it? Do you have a Florida driver's license? Do you have a Florida voter's ID card?
Okay.
Those kinds of things. Those are incidents of domicile.
So that's like, I remember this when our kids were getting their learner's permits and driver's license the first time. They would have to remember all this stuff in the little driver's manual. And it had all this stuff about how you would prove who you are, that you actually are Floridian and all that. So do you have to actually do something up north to say I'm not a north person anymore? Or?
Some states up north are very aggressive at pursuing people who move to Florida, trying to get them to pay estate taxes. New York is particularly one. So you want to make sure when you move to Florida, you sever all those ties to the other state so you don't give them any ammunition to say you're actually a New York resident. So you want to get a Florida driver's license, Florida voter ID card. If you belong to any clubs or associations, you probably want to sever that as well.
Wow. Yeah, because I was thinking, like, you and I have had so many conversations over the years where you have talked about, there was a particular report, I think it was a U.S. News report, and you talked about they were asking people who were going to retire or newly retired, like, what their list of things that they were concerned about in retirement was, and it was always, like, stuff like where I'm going to play golf next or things like that, and you would always explain that you got down to number 18 or 20, and that's when people started getting concerned about long-term, like, how am I going to manage my health and living? And isn't this the case that happens as people get toward the end of their life, that they could run into some huge medical bills, either just through the process of things they may go through, or like we've talked about so many times on the radio, maybe they have to work to get towards a Medicaid assistance so they could be in a skilled nursing facility or get some help at that point in their life because of the cost of that stuff. But then after they pass, then, in another state, they might be coming back and trying to figure out where they could get that money back from.
They put a lien on the house.
Yeah, but not in Florida.
No, not in Florida.
Wow. So why don't more people? Well, I guess people are doing this.
People do move to Florida. The third type of homestead, so to keep us rolling, is something called the devise and descent clause of the Florida Constitution. And basically, that says if I own my house with my wife, when I die, it goes to her automatically. Okay. But sometimes, because we have second marriages, you get in these circumstances where I have a house, I meet this wonderful woman, and she moves into my house. And her name is not on my house.
Right.
And we're married, but it's our primary resident.
Yeah.
And I say, when I die, I'm going to leave the house to my kids. Okay. I die. The Florida Constitution says not so fast. By virtue of being my spouse, she can either get the use of that property for the remainder of her life, or if she so desires, she can convert it into a 1/2 ownership interest in the property.
Automatically, unless is that regardless of what a will says, or just
correct? It's automatic.
Wow.
So you cannot disenfranchise your spouse of the primary residence. Additionally, I can, even though my name's the only one on the deed, I cannot transfer it to anybody without my spouse signing the deed. I also cannot mortgage it without my spouse's consent. So there are, by virtue of marriage, that kicks in. And I've had several cases that have been very interesting where I've had these wives come in and they said, my husband went down to the bank and got an equity line on the house. And I never signed anything for it. How can he do that? And I said, he can't.
Wow.
The only way he could have done that would be to forge your signature.
Wow.
And believe it or not, in all three cases, that's what happened. And guess why they were the husbands were getting equity lines on the house?
I can only guess. It sounds pretty nefarious to me.
They were all gamblers.
All
gamblers.
Wow.
Had run out of their own money, so now they're trying to gamble away on the equity in the house.
Oh my goodness! And
they didn't want their wives to find out.
Now, in these cases, was the spouse actually on the deed, or were they just married to the person?
Well, in these cases, the spouse was actually on the deed. All three of those.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But you can't mortgage the house or put a lien on it without the spouse's consent there.
So that brings up a question, because I wonder how often this plays in the modern era where people don't always get married, but they just are saying like, okay, we're going to form a household together. So here's two people. They're not actually legally married. And I guess this may be the crux of my question is if they're not legally married, however that's defined, then those things don't protect.
Correct.
So it's like if two people are in the house and that relationship isn't on paper someplace, that person has no rights.
Correct.
As far as that goes. So what is the definition of marriage? Is it like it's
You
recorded
have to
in a courthouse?
Yeah,
someplace
you have to have a marriage certificate. You have to have a ceremony. And, you can have a notary sign off on the ceremony. But, yeah, you have to have a formal marriage. Florida does not recognize common law marriage.
And that's what that would be like. Oh, well, we've been together for 20 years. We just never did any paperwork about it, right?
Correct.
Oh, wow. See, these are things that I don't know that the average person knows or would ever get into a reason to think about. It's like,
and interestingly, I recently found out in Florida, it is illegal for a priest or a pastor to marry somebody who is not going to formally get a marriage license.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
So you can't just pop up and say, "Well,
we're married in the eyes of God." But
Pastor Smith married us in the eyes of God, and that's not going to be enough because you're going to have to show that piece of paper that's probably on file at a courthouse someplace. Correct. Am I saying that?
Yeah,
right?
And it's actually illegal for the pastor to do.
Wow. So the pastor needs to look at the paperwork and make sure it's.
Well, they have to sign the marriage license.
Oh yeah, right. Wow.
So yeah. Now, if you have minor kids, it gets a little more complicated. So the house is in my name. I have a wife and minor kids, and I die. My wife would get the use of the house for life, but upon her death, it would go to the minor kids.
Yeah. Wow. So complicated.
Now, you can waive that through a pre or a post-nuptial agreement.
Okay.
So there are ways you can work around those things so that doesn't happen.
Is that handled differently in other states? I mean, I know you're the Florida attorney, but I mean, just in your experience, is this like kind of unique to our state, or is it kind of there's some version of this?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I assume some states are like us, and there's probably some states that aren't like us.
You know, this is a point that I bring up over and over whenever we do Helping Seniors Radio. First of all, I always say when Joe Steckler, who founded this organization after successfully building up the Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation, getting those Joe's Clubs built, and he goes, Kerry, there's more work we got to do. He said, we need information resources for seniors. And I remember thinking a little bit naively at the time, Joe, there's plenty of stuff that's out there. There's great tools in like ARP and stuff like that. But the more I've been around that, I realized that you have to know what's going on in your state, in your locality. It's not just enough to, see what's going on the national stage. You need to know what Florida law says about this because that's what's going to impact your life, right?
Very true. Very true. And, things differ from county to county on the procedures and how things work. And even in, across the state, there may be a way that we do things here in Brevard in the 18th Circuit, but you go across the state and they do things totally different.
I was going to say, I've been a fly on the wall at a couple of the FSGA. They did a law and ethics thing, and it was fascinating because they had guardians and attorneys from like literally all over the state, And they were talking about, well, in our county, the judge requires us this. And then somebody from a different county was going, well, it's a little different in our county because this is what we do. And I thought, that's interesting. I mean, I would understand that Florida law could be different than Georgia law or Alabama law and like that. But I didn't really realize that how it actually comes to pass could actually be different county by county.
And you can end up with all kinds of different rules depending on where you're practicing.
So really, so when Joe started this organization, we said, number one, he was really visionary because there's more seniors now than ever before, simply because, A, people are aging into seniordom. 2, people are just living longer. But 3, so many people are moving to Florida. And that's why we always talk about you've really got to get to somebody that is an expert locally. And that's why we really rail against 800 numbers that people see. How many shows have we done, Bill, where we talked about these commercials? You say, oh, you can do your estate planning in minutes online. Right. They have no idea how much danger they're in until they actually have to use that piece of paper. Or worse, a lot of times, like they just assumed, I had good help up in New York State, and so I think I'm all set to go. But that's you may be missing things that are not, and these are not small things. These could be tens of thousands of dollars when you get something like this wrong.
Correct.
Wow. So this is the advantage of getting a hold of somebody that really knows. And we talk about this. You've got to invest some of your time to studying these issues. That's why Joe called it an aging plan. We call it getting your ducks in a row. And we say there's 2 corollaries that go with that. Number 1, don't try this on your own. Get a hold of somebody who really knows the lay of the land. Whether we're talking about elder law, whether we're talking about senior living resources, whether we are talking about almost anything that could impact a senior. Like if you want Medicare, Medicaid, insurance assistance, get a local agent who knows the plans, knows the doctors, knows the hospitals, can help you navigate what's going to make the best sense for you. And then the second thing we say all the time is don't put this stuff off, because if you don't, we've said this so many times on the show before, Bill, if you don't have a plan, the government has a plan. The question is it just a plan that you would want to agree with or no?
Very true. And if you want to preserve what choices you have the ability to make, you want to have that plan put in writing.
Now, you do an awful lot of, you're very generous with your time. You do a lot of seminars, particularly at One Senior Place, that are great places to get invested and start learning. We already talked earlier in the show about everybody needs to get a hold of that resource guide that you have, that you publish in Boomer Magazine. It's on your FloridaElderLaw.net website. What is it called again?
The Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
And I like it because it's so well written that you do not have to be an attorney like Bill to be able to read it and understand how it applies to your life. It's written in very, what I would call everyday English, and very easy to get a hold of. But then you also do a lot of seminars so that people can start to at least know the right questions that they need to be thinking about. And you say what? Call One Senior Place and ask them, say, when's the seminar that Bill's doing, or what's a good way to keep up with all that?
Yeah, they can call there, or they can call our office at 321-253-1667.
Let's say that number again while everybody grabs a pencil to jot all of that down.
321-253-1667.
Yeah, so we're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson. The law firm is William A. Johnson, PA. But you don't do all this work by yourself. You have a great team, right?
I do, and my daughter works in my office as well. She's a lawyer and does the same thing I do.
Yeah, and I always think experience matters. Bill, how long have you been doing this?
Oh, I've been an attorney since 1991, and I've had a law office 30 years.
See, so I don't suppose people can walk in your office and you haven't heard something similar before and figured out this is how we have to approach this situation.
Correct.
It makes it very valuable. So again, board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson sharing information on Homestead and the value of that in Florida. And really, we exist. I'm talking about helping seniors as a 100% local to Brevard charity, 501c3. We exist for no other reason than to serve seniors and their families and get information in their hands that's going to make a difference. And I am so personally convinced after I can't believe we're into 15 years of this, Bill. That's, to me, like you were there from from before when Joe was getting Brevard Alzheimer's, but it's been 15 years in our little helping seniors world, you know?
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like it just gets more, first of all, it gets more interesting each year because there is so much to know. And I still feel like kind of like an outsider trying to learn my way into all this. But I will say that the education you get by keeping up with the materials that helping seniors, at least we start to know maybe the right questions to ask as we go along. And so many people probably walk into your office and they come in with assumptions, and then sadly you have to kind of like unpack those assumptions and go, that's not exactly how this is going to work here.
Right.
And you've got to get the right help. But that's why we exist as helping seniors. So we're going to close the show on our fundraising side of things because, as Joe always would say, Kerry, it's never easy to get to keep a nonprofit going. You're always having to look for money and ask people for money. And Joe came up with a way to do it that's so much fun years ago. It's called the Helping Seniors Car Raffle. And so I'm just going to give you a quick pitch on it. You buy a ticket, it's $25 for a donation, or 5 tickets is a $100 donation. And you are making a donation. Somebody's going to win a brand new car October 26, 2025. I can't believe this is our 9th annual car raffle. Brand new car from the AJ Hires family of dealerships. There's some great choices. I'm looking at a dog. The dog is not one of the choices, but it's a cute dog. Anyway, you can have your choice of a brand new car in the Helping Seniors car raffle. October 26th, somebody is going to go home with keys to a new car. And if you're in town, you are invited out to the American Muscle Car Museum, which is that fantastic 500-car muscle car display extravaganza is the only way I know how to put it. They're at the right there on Sarno Road. And a lot of people, I'm surprised how many people have not been there. But even if you were there with us last year, you want to come back because Mark keeps adding cars. He's got tanks. He's got bicycles. He's got gas station pumps. He's got tractors. He's got everything in there. It's a fun afternoon out, Sunday afternoon, October 26th, 1 to 4. And then, of course, the most important thing, at least from our perspective, is you're helping us keep Joe's work going in the Helping Seniors organization. Get a ticket, call us today, 321-473-7770, or go online to helpingseniors.carraffle.com and you can get your tickets there. That's the time we have for Helping Seniors Radio on today. See you right back here next Wednesday. Have a great week till then.